The Autism Research Institute relies on the generosity of donors like you to make this webcast possible. If you enjoy this presentation, please consider making a donation. Thank you.
Now, before we get started, I'll introduce our speaker. Dr. Angela Mouzakitis has worked with students with autism for more than 20 years. She is a professor at St. John's University in the psychology department. Her research includes working with behavior support plans for children with autism spectrum disorder. Additionally, she has published in the areas of treatment integrity of behavior support plans in public schools for teachers working with students with high-functioning autism. Currently, her focus is on the development of appropriate transition and vocational programs for adolescents with moderate disabilities. So now I will turn it over to Dr. Mouzakitis.
Thank you so much. Welcome, everyone. I just wanted to preface this to say, as I was watching the threads and watching what's unraveling with everything going on with the coronavirus, I started to see and started to remember how parents would feel when there was a small crisis that would occur and what that meant in terms of, oh no, what if schools close down? Or what if the therapist can't come? So, and former friends of mine, students of mine started to reach out and say, what am I going to do? My child's going to be home all day. So what we're really trying to do here is to identify some strategies and supports that will get you through this time. We're not looking to become superstars. And I had started off the talk saying it was going to be home all day, but the way things are going, it could be all week or all month. So we're going to do this to try to stay sane. Now, what we're looking at is, first I want to say thank you. And where I'm coming from is, I'm coming from the evidence and from the research, but also everything I'm going to present today is essentially the patterns that I've seen where things start to go wrong at home. So I've been called in as a consultant to look at problem behavior, look at the development of plans in schools and in homes. And people will always come with a drastic need, please help us. And as I started to take notes on all my different observations, I noticed patterns of errors that people were making across the board, not because they were bad teachers or bad parents, but it's just when you are working with someone, it's very difficult to see exactly how events unfold from a different perspective. So I identified that if we can at least do this bare minimum of good strategies in the home, then maybe we don't need the complex plans that we're looking at. So we need to establish a fluency with, here's good strategies, get really good at these, and then things will start to unfold a little bit more easily. So today we're going to share a couple of those, and I've picked the ones that I think are, one, the easiest to adapt in the homes, and we'll give some suggestions. And then also a few suggestions on when things don't go beautifully well according to plan, like they will the majority of the time, then what can we do when that happens? So what I recommend and what I'm also doing for myself is, this is definitely going to be a unique adventure that we're all going to go on. I don't want to sound too lovey-dovey and like a hippie sitting singing Kumbaya. However, you should get yourself a journal, or in parent terms, a composition notebook that we never finished using and they wrote one page in, and start taking notes on this experience. I don't mean write a book at the end of the day. I only have one child who is neurotypical and I'm still exhausted. So I can't imagine having more children and then having varying needs on top of that. But even if you drop a sentence on you, how you feel, on your children, on what's happening, keep it nice and simple. There will be regret later on if you don't log these experiences now. So even if all you have at the end of the day is the strength to muster a sad face, like this day did not go well, just write it down. It gives you an opportunity to stop and think. When I used to get these reflective assignments in school, I didn't quite grasp how important it was. However, right now, especially when a lot of this time and in this self-quarantine that we have going on, we need to rely a little bit more on ourselves to just get a little bit of a handle on how things are going. But first there's my little throw out to Lin-Manuel Miranda and Hamilton. There are a few truths that we need to hold to be self-evident. And that is one, where you're going to do your best. Unless you can't, then do something close. And on days when you can't come close, then that's okay as well. But we're going to do our best. My favorite quote is by Maya Angelou. It says, do the best you can until you know better. And then when you know better, do better. And that's really all we can expect. You're going to have superstar days that maybe are the result of your wonderful strategies, or maybe your child is just having a better day that day. You're not their teacher and you're not their therapist at home. You're not a super Pinterest mom or dad. I mean, maybe some of you might be. And you're not the queen and king of social media. And I do want to say just a quick word on social media. What we do know about what it's doing to at least our teens is that it gets a bit depressing when you start scrolling through and see everybody else is apparently having the time of their lives quarantined in their house. And they're creating these amazing projects. They're building like hydrodomes in their backyard, and they're learning more than they could ever possibly learn at school. And it's important to remember what you're looking at is the director's cut version of that person's life. And you're also looking at the first few days of that before Lord of the Flies has actually sunk in. So be aware that that's not the majority out there. That's a few that get a lot of traction in the different feeds. And it could be much more isolating to many of us to see that everyone else appears to be doing a better job and having a blast. We will have moments where we're having a really good time. However, it is probably not going to be the norm. However, at the end of some of my slides, I've put a little post-it just for things for you to think about and to focus on. And we do want to think about, at the end of the day, what are you most proud of? Like, what was the one thing that got through your day that you're like, oh, I did this and this actually works and I can be proud of that. And keep those going, or else you're going to stick on the negative. 2, remember that you're going to be tired. This is going to be a crap time. You're going to have to do a lot of work. And you may start to lose it a little bit here and there. And we'll talk about that. That's okay too. But what this isn't is lost instructional time. What you now have, given some of the structural supports we're going to talk about, is the most opportunities for distributed practice of all of the skills that your kids have been working on throughout the day. And now you have this bird's eye view. You have a bird's eye view to be able to identify what is mastered, what they're learning at school. How is that working out in the class, in the home environment? And it is exciting. Yes, you might not be excited all of the time. However, if you're struggling with certain areas, take those notes and find out. If you're trying to do a basic snack prep, your child is 12 years old, and this does not appear to be a skill set that's anywhere near their repertoire, that's something that you're now going to have all of this valuable information to impart to their teachers and to their, if you've got behavior analysts you're working with, or if you've got ABA providers at home, if you've got floor time providers, people using a more developmental DIR approach, whatever it is, you are now going to have this information. And we may as well make the most of it. But this is the real time that's the most important. This is where we see, does everything they've been working on at school actually translate appropriately? Because if it doesn't, then there really isn't a point. We need to make sure that those are transitioning appropriately, especially if your children are at or above that transition age over around 12. So it can be exciting. Now, for yourself, if you're feeling particularly energetic one day, take one of those daily activities and think, okay, we look at the challenge down here. What skills are involved in snack prep? And how can I now embed that in the program? So you can now see, do they have what's necessary? My child is working on receptive object identification. So now if I say, go to the fridge and get the milk, does that translate to what that looks like? So you should, of course, have a knowledge of what they're working on at school, and now take a look at what they're working on at home. What I don't want you to feel burdened with is to do this all day long, which is why I would say each day, pick one activity, pick snack prep, pick watching a movie, which is a skill set, and see what's needed there. 3, things will likely get a little ugly. So it's not going to be all that we're crapping unicorns and rainbows. It's going to get a little bit difficult also. And this is normally not what I sound like, but we need to forgive ourselves for these minutes, moments, hours, and days. Parents of neurotypical kids get that. They get the opportunity to say, well, I guess I won Mother of the Year today, and it's laughed off. And some of us with children that have disabilities feel that we don't get those opportunities. Losing a day here or there where things didn't go as planned, and maybe there was more screen time than you would have liked, is going to be okay. It's going to happen. It shouldn't happen all the time. It's not good for any child to be that way all the time. However, it is going to happen, so we need to forgive ourselves for that. And then additionally, take a look at what was something that got really ugly today, and if I could pick one thing, how can I make it better tomorrow? And another point that we hold self-evident is you will not, nor should you, try everything that we're going to discuss here today. I'm going to give a lot of information, and they're going to sound like very basic strategies. However, if you pick one or two and try to implement them, you will start to see that as basic as they may sound, it's challenging to incorporate it and to implement it across the day with consistency. So I would pick one or two. If you want to pick three because you're feeling adventurous, maybe you just have one child, then you can try that too. My recommendation would be pick a couple that you want to implement that speak to you a little bit more because it addresses a specific difficulty that you may be having, and implement them. Give it a shot. As you become comfortable and fluent, then you can add more. So this is all being said after your visual schedule, of course. I'm going to give some guidelines on how to make a visual schedule, but that is the #1 recommendation. If you don't have a visual schedule in your house, that's the first priority. That's the first place you have to go, is make that schedule. And then think about, what did you try that maybe was different for you today, and think about how it went and how it will go better again tomorrow. When I've worked in schools, a lot of things that has happened to me and that I've been told is by the second week of school, teacher might say something like, we've tried everything and nothing works. Nothing is going to work the first day. Nothing that we're going to discuss here today is going to be that magic pill that, oh my goodness, Angela gave this strategy and now suddenly we have no problem behavior. It's going to take time, and it's going to take repeated exposure. So it is important to track it and see how it's going to go. Now, this is going to shape the rest of the presentation. All behavior that we're looking at is a form of communication. Our children are always communicating something. Our spouses are always communicating something with their behavior. And the environment is huge. So that's the task that you now have that's going to be more challenging, which is we're home a lot with all the kids in an environment that's not going to be spotless all the time, though we'll talk about tricks around that also. And the environment is going to build up, and everything that we have in our environment is going to continue to build up and affect our children and affect us. We want to minimize the negative effects. So what I want to talk about is the camel and the straw and the camel's back. Now, a lot of times you'll hear people ask you things like, well, what triggered the behavior? What was the thing that really upset him and got him going, and just don't do that again? Okay, well, here's the challenge with triggers, or some of you may know them as antecedents. The antecedents are the triggers, or that one thing that if you do will really set your child into a different realm. It's really not the most important thing. The most important thing is everything else that has been going on in that environment for your child all day long. Now, let's say it's raining outside, so they can't get their outdoor time. And you're not feeling well because you did not come down with corona, maybe you have a headache or something. And now your snacks are starting to run out and you're stuck with a bunch of canned green beans. The internet possibly went down. So now here you are in a home and you're set up with all of these different straws that are piling on your back and piling on your child's back. But maybe your child isn't reacting yet. Like, okay, my snacks aren't here, but I can deal. And you're not as attentive with me as you usually are, but I can deal. And the internet's not working, but I have my games and I can deal. And then one of their peers puts on a different movie on the DVD player, and suddenly your child has a tantrum. That movie going on under other circumstances may not have caused a problem at all. However, in this setting, when everything is piling on, that's the straw that will break the camel's back. That's the setting event that will set the child up for failure. The reason I'm making such a big point out of this is that our environment and how chaotic it might be, how organized it might be, how many people are in it, the lighting, the noise value that's going on. I just realized, speaking of that, my dog is snoring in the background. All of those things will build up. And what we want to do is diminish all of those things. And that's where the focus is going to be, is how can we set up our environments, our schedules, our routines, so that we can take this stack of hay over here and make it smaller, so that the likelihood of triggers and of this handsome little bird over here bringing the straw over is not going to result in this more substantial problem behavior. So the entire focus of our talk is going to be on prevent. We're not teaching any drastic new plans right now. I have the feeling that if we continue this direction, we might start to see more webinars to teach those as well. But right now, we're working on everything that we have more control over, which is nice. We're not talking about things we don't have control over. We're talking about things that we can change, at least within ourselves and our environments. These are controllable things for the most part. Visual supports are imperative. I'm going to give a bunch of examples for you. I'm going to give you visual supports to understand the visual supports. And think of that first bullet right there. As neurotypical adults, mostly neurotypical adults, slightly anxious adults possibly, imagine you go to work and on an hourly basis, your employer now starts to tell you every hour on the hour, okay, here's what you're going to be doing the next hour. And here's what you're going to be doing the hour that. And you don't have an idea of your day at all. And instead, you're relying on someone else to consistently come and update you on this information. What level of anxiety and frustration will that give, that you cannot anticipate what your day will hold? Now, many of us may feel that way actually right now, even though I think we're going to get into some pretty consistent routines of within the home, since our options are a little bit limited at this point. However, imagine that world where cognitively you're not quite there yet, you're still learning about the world around you, and you don't know what's coming up, and you don't know how long it's going to be going on for. You're playing with your iPad, you're having a blast, loving life, and you don't know when someone's going to come and take it away, or yank it away, or tell you that's it, or when it's going to die. So we want to take away those toxic aspects of the environment. If it's not fair to ask us to expect to be able to function without a schedule, imagine asking a child or a young adult who really needs that schedule to go ahead and wing it and just wait, I'll update you every hour. When you think about it, it's borderline cruel to think that we wouldn't have outlined the schedules throughout the day. Visuals support our kids. One, they provide a sense of predictability. And I'm not saying that you're going to put a visual schedule up and suddenly the world is going to open up, balloons will fall from the sky and everything will be lovely. It will take time. But I've yet to work with a child that didn't acclimate to understanding that this is the schedule, here's how I update it, and here is how I can predict what's happening. And many of which eventually start to take responsibility over their own schedule. It's concrete, you can see it, it works with our kids' strengths, and it decreases frustration. Now, I am sure many of you have seen one of these schedules fly around social media like crazy. Now, for some of you, you may be thinking, this is perfect, so I can just follow this exactly. Others of us might be thinking, thank you for the ideas, but we're not exactly going to be able to follow this to the T. However, the point is really appropriate and necessary, which is we need a schedule. We need to know what we can expect from our day and how to prepare for it. This was meant for typically developing children who need a schedule, children that have an idea of what happens after breakfast and TV, that lunch or outdoor might be coming up soon. So this is a priority. Now, one helpful strategy is, before you go crazy, for those of you that don't have visual schedules, and the reason I say no groans is because whenever I mention to families, okay, you need to get a visual schedule, and I get a lot of responses like, yeah, we know, I'm working on that. No, you need to get this in place and get it done. And if it means that today, tomorrow, everyone's going to be Lord of the Flying all over your house and children are going to be free range all over the place, this is a priority. It doesn't have to be neat and fancy. I'm going to show you a whole bunch of schedules, some of which are a little scary looking, some of which look like definitely it was done by a Martha Stewart Pinterest mom or dad, but it's imperative that the schedule gets put in place and you can tweak it as you go. One thing I would suggest is, if you don't have one so far, start jotting down what you do all day long and see where it goes. And then you can also start to see how you can improve upon it. Now, I'm going to show you some of my favorites that I love. My absolute favorite is this one here because it's portable. Not necessarily, this is a morning routine example and it can be adapted. But what I love about this one is these little tabs over here, they're just folded over and they can just check them off. However, what I usually use is a dry erase board and I sketch it out. The quality of the photos, regardless of your child's cognitive ability, is actually not what's the most important. I've had children that were not able to read, follow step by step, just seeing that there was separate items that they knew that things were going to get done. So there's many different ways that you can do it. And I didn't mention this earlier, but everything I'm going to be recommending is going to be low tech. I think that during this time, you got to save your technology for when you really need it. You know, like taking a shower or going to the bathroom or hiding in the bathroom or whatever you might need to take your little break. We don't want to overuse the technology, and I'll go into it later, so I won't get into it right now. So these are all low tech things that you can hopefully put together right now. If it's not beautifully laminated, it's fine. If it's a dry erase board, that's fine too. Here's some different versions that we have here, smaller ones. You can make them in this format where you're just putting pictures together. I'm a horrible artist, but I've sketched out schedules for kids and it's usually never been much of a problem. Here, I really like this if you think that the whole schedule all day long might be a bit of a problem. So you can have them together, but it's nice and broken down. So here's what we're going to do for the morning. Here's what we're going to do for the afternoon and for the evening. There is no limits to how you can make the schedule work for your family. You can dry erase on your fridge, assuming you can wipe off your fridge. I know I sound like I'm getting very excited about schedules, but I am. That's why, because they're so helpful. They're an evidence-based to show that they decrease problem behavior. They increase predictability for our kids. And if there's only one thing that you're going to do, make it a visual schedule. If you have a little bit more going on, this was taken from a school, however, can completely be modified to give days. Now, you don't have a printer at home, or you're like me, you have a printer that just never quite worked. It's kind of a waste of a printer. Then don't use the Velcro and instead just put the, sketch it in with your little stick man drawings. I've yet to have a child complain, and I'm not a good artist. But this is also good, especially if there's other events coming up in the week that maybe are more exciting. Maybe mommy's not home, but she's going to be home Wednesday all day long, or daddy's going to be home Wednesday all day long, so they can see what's happening in the week ahead. That predictability and understanding will decrease problem behavior, decrease anxiety. Here are just some basic templates to utilize. You can plug them in terms of to do and done. Think about your own checklists and to-do lists. I mean, it's dopamine is released all over from your brain into your body every time we check off things that we have to do. So these are helpful strategies. It's going to be good. Here's different ways to do it. I like this one here as well. I'm not sure if you guys can see my arrow, but my little handprint there, guy. But, oh, shoot. I lost you. I want to make sure you guys can still see me. I think we're good. Okay. So here, what I really like a lot is that you can, as you finish up, these little pieces here can get dumped right in this little all done column. Now, for some kids, the vanishing of it there isn't as great. So they might not want to see them vanishing, and you may want to move it over like we have here to a different side so they can see, here's what I did and here's what's done. It's all about a preference, and you know your child, you know what's going to work best for them. Here are a couple of not so fancy ones on a easel to write down what's happening. For some children, if they're a little bit more fluent with their reading, you can do that. But even if they're not, kids like seeing things close up and they like to know what to do. And it's also an opportunity to narrate it. I love these boards as well because they hold everything. And here you can sketch out different sequences for each activities as they go. Now, daily schedules, how to get started. Draft out what your day looks like. Figure out what your schedule is going to look like. I'm not going to go into all these steps because it will be available and I want to get to different strategies as well. However, these are the steps for you to identify, how do I get this started? And if you want to, and you want to collect a little bit of information, then at the end of the day, on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being this was a completely prompted activity, to 5 being this is completely independent, how did the schedule go? How was it used? So how do you start up? Start of the day, you go with your child to prepare it and to set it up. Build it together. Talk to them about what they're going to be doing. Let them look at it. Don't let them play around with the pictures and make it an activity. If you think that this looks very rewarding to them, it just gives you more information about other things that you can set up. Think about how the tasks are completed throughout the day. Were they starting to go over and check it? So look at those different areas. And then in terms of guidelines, make sure, I bet we wish we did this all in schools as well, make sure you're alternating types of activities. So don't have the kids sitting at the table for too long. I know many of us get very anxious about academics, and I can't stress enough that it is just as, if not more important, to incorporate your children into all aspects of the daily routine of breakfast prep, lunch prep, cleaning up, getting the chores done, doing some maintenance work if that is, but don't have them sitting for too long, and make sure to include multiple opportunities for movement. You can do YouTube dance videos. I over here, stir crazy is a real thing. You will start to get stir crazy. Pillow fights. All the cool parents I hear let their kids take all the cushions off the couches and build giant forts and jump into them. It sounds like a disaster, but it's going to get a lot of energy, and you'll find that you are having fun. And if you find that you've tapped into something that you didn't realize was going to be this giant rewarding thing for your child, now you've got something else, another trick up your sleeve. If you notice that your child is getting upset that an activity is over when you have to put it off the schedule, tell them they can put it on later. Put it on for tomorrow. This isn't the time when we're going to say, no, you've got to learn what the rules are and I'm putting my foot down. It's not. If you tapped into something that your child is loving, you want to make sure that we've got that. Now, and save the really good stuff. Save the tech, the activities, the preferred games, and everything for when you need it, for when you know that you've got to make this more complicated meal. You know that you can't be on top of your kids. You know that if you're with your kids too much longer, it's going to be unhappy all around. You want to save those opportunities. Now, I'm not going to go through this either, but this was just something that I just drafted, looking at my day to see what could happen, that you can also just take a look at and see what works for you. One thing I just want to highlight here is, if you notice, we've got breaks over here. Sorry, we've got breaks, physical break, break again, break again, break again. Include those breaks into the schedule throughout the day. Put a picture of an iPad, put a picture of a phone, put a picture of their favorite movie. You want to have that embedded constantly throughout the day. You're going to need it. And if it makes you feel any better, maybe not so much with the more behavioral classrooms, but most of our kids only get about 2 hours of academic engagement throughout their school day. You're going to be engaging your kids a lot. You will appreciate those breaks. And when they get those breaks, and they've got a break of a movie or a tech, you can set it, no one's gonna judge you. You wanna do 30 minutes, you wanna do an hour, that's fine. However, as a parent, your child is on break for 30 minutes, let them have that break. Let them play with the iPad, let them play with the tech. When then you rally them again together and it's time to create, paint, or draw, you're rejuvenated as well. And you have more energy that you can say, okay, you did have a break, and now I'm going to engage you. And then we're going to get a break again. You cannot be on the entire time. It's exhausting. And what'll happen is like what happens on that first week of New Year's when everybody suddenly joins a gym and they're going to the gym 5 or 7 days a week, and then everybody drops out of the gym because nobody can maintain that level of gym. Mostly nobody. Maybe Gina Feliciano at CUSAT can. But nobody else is going to be able to maintain that level of intense attention. So give yourself a break, give your kids a break. Here are a couple of things that I've done in different programs that I've worked in with little mini movement breaks, just adding a little bit of fun. Put some little movement breaks into these little boxes, and you can just say, okay, you guys need a movement break, let's pick one out. This is another tool that I like that unfortunately we may not be able to use as much, but many children are struggling with, when are we going back to school? Why aren't we at school? What's happening? So I like to use calendars like this, usually around the holidays when the kids are going to be off school for maybe 7 days at a time, so they can understand these are all house days and these are all school days. We don't know 100% what's going to happen right now, but this is just another tool that might be helpful to utilize. Other tools that you can use is perhaps within your schedule, you have other tasks that might need a visual cue because they have more steps in them. So something like this is you can check off, if you rinsed off the dishes, what the different steps are included. And like I said before, save the tech. So my preference, if you can, is to isolate one piece of technology that is utilized for free time that is essentially theirs, that you don't take a lot of control over. So if like they have an iPad, the iPad is used for free time, fun time. It's not used to also run an academic app or, you know, let's watch the sea otter cam at the San Diego Zoo, which is awesome, by the way. It is also, speaking of that, tempting to get caught up in all of these different websites. If you've got your kid on technology when they're on break, and now you want to engage them with more technology, that's going to be a problem. So we want to make sure that we're engaging them beyond the text. I would save it for when you need it. Now, this is a big point that no parents like to listen to, and I hope somebody here does, but it's all fun and game until someone loses an eye. So what happens is that most of us, if we get an activity together and it's amazing and it's going so great, we usually stay too long in that activity because we're so excited it's going so well. And we want to take as much advantage of this as possible. I cannot believe how much they're loving this game. Let's keep going. If you let that game go too long, it ends up ending on their terms. And now it ends with crankiness, and it ends with crying, and it ends with they don't want to look at that game again. So even though you don't want to end something that's going great, you've got to become quite adept at figuring out where is the sweet spot that they've had a great time, we're going to wrap it up, and we're going to use it again tomorrow because they're going to be so excited for it. It's kind of like if you're on a date, 3 hours is a great time and you have an amazing time. But if you let it go to like 5 hours, 6 hours, and I mean, maybe that might be good for ruling some things out. However, if you're going to let it go that far, you didn't end it when you should have. Also, based on this, know when to stop. Maybe you had an idea for a great activity and no one likes it. You're not married to any of these. Swallow your pride. This isn't working. Give yourself permission to stop. You don't have to say, well, we started the activity and now we need to finish it. Call it a loss, lick your wounds, and move on. Where did I go? Scheduled attention. This is especially important if you have multiple children in the home. Maybe you have multiple children with autism. Maybe you just have one child with autism and you have a bunch of neurotypical children, and they all deserve your love and attention and your one-on-one time. So on the schedule, place in when you're going to get that one-on-one cuddle time. And it doesn't have to be one-on-one, we're reading The Great Gatsby. It could be one-on-one, we're just going to cuddle and get together. For your child that may have problems with that, you can add on to their schedule. When mama is with Dimitri, Anthony gets the iPad. So they're getting something fun as well while you have that time scheduled with your other child. You will get caught up in the day with everything you have to do. So even if you just schedule 15 minutes to say, we're just gonna do cuddle lovey cuddles, give yourself that and do that. Be consistent with other adults in your home. All of these are things that maybe one failure on these here and there isn't a big deal, but think about all of these different strategies and what it could look like when they're kind of all a little bit failed on that side. So you want to make sure that you're not giving different messages with other adults in your home, because that could cause big problems. Timers. I actually love sand timers because you could see the time going away. There's different types of timers. However, if you're that parent that puts the timer on and your kids can negotiate 5 minutes with you like till infinity, don't use the timer, because the timers are going to be very important for setting those time limits on the different limited activities, iPad, reading, things that they want to do for a long time and things that they don't want to do for a long time. So they need to learn that when it buzzes, when it beeps, when it's over, not like at the playground when you say 5 more minutes 700 times and it just keeps going. So if you're not going to stick to it, don't use it, because you don't want to spoil it for a future use. Decrease wait time. If you are setting them up where they're going to be waiting for you, it's going to cause problems. So if everyone's ready to go for a walk, but you as a parent know that you need to get the water, get the dog bags, get the hand sanitizer, whatever else it is that you need to do, say hi to Nancy before you go. What you want to do is say, let me get all of that together, and then I will give the direction, let's go for a walk. Because if you don't, and you kind of say, okay, guys, let's get together and go for a walk, and then you're not ready, you're setting them up for failure. You gave them the direction, and if they're following it, now you're going to make them wait, and it's going to cause problems, and you can't get on that walk when half your family is crying or having a problem. So this, by the way, applies to all spouses and children. Fidgets. I like to keep a bin of these handy for everyone, specifically for times that it used to be that we used to complain about watching too much TV. Well, now I'm actually really excited if we can limit it to one screen at a time. So if we watch a movie, but for some kids it's hard. But for us as a family, cuddling and watching a movie is actually a really big deal. So I like to keep a box of fidgets around. We do this at my home as well, just so something you can play with your fingers. It doesn't have all of your attention. It's also good for story time as well. Just some things to play with. I can see that I'm starting to get a little bit close to my time, so I'm just going to go through a couple of these a little bit more. My concern was that I just had too much that I wanted to impart, so I'm going to do my best with what I have left. Here's just some visuals when you're explaining to your kids. Give them clear expectations. If you're going to watch a video in paint, first we're going to get our materials together, then we're going to follow the video in paint, and then we're going to clean up. Here's what the finished product is going to look like. Let them know what the expectations are. Here's just a couple more examples of how we can do these types of first then boards. Offer choices. So that doesn't mean ask your kids, what do you want to do? What do you want to work for? What do you want to play with? Think about when you and your spouse or your significant other are trying to order out food, and you guys will go back and forth with I don't know, what do you want? I don't know, what do you want? Forever until you die, because the amounts are, it's limitless what you could do. And our kids will get overwhelmed. And when they get overwhelmed, then it's going to cause additional problems, etc. So you want to provide them with specific options and choices. If something is not available in your house, get it out of sight. This is not the time to teach them. You can't always get what you want. This is not a Rolling Stone song right now. Right now, you want to have an environment that is set up for success. So get it out of the way. It's like trying to diet with like 3 rolls of Oreos in front of you. You can't do it. It's very, very challenging. Don't repeat yourself ad nauseum. You start to sound like Charlie Brown's teacher. What you want to do is say it one time and then follow through. If you don't, you're going to find yourself making yourself crazy as well with repeating yourself over and over again. And all you're teaching them is the words don't really matter, because you're just going to keep repeating it over and over again until eventually the volume increases. Dry erase boards are my savior. I use them constantly. I use them to make schedules. I use them to illustrate choices. I use them to solve problems. I use them consistently throughout the day. You should definitely have them around, and they're very low tech. You can use them for choices, for schedules, to figure out what you're going to do, and you likely have it already in your house. Now, the environment, I am not saying go through your house and clean everything up. And I'm not saying that you need to have like one of those ready for HGTV houses. What I'm saying is literally pick an area in your house where you can shove all of the excess for now and get it out of the way. A big problem that is sometimes seen is when you think that by putting more activities out, you're going to engage your child more because they have so many more options of what they can do. The opposite will happen. They're going to get overwhelmed and frustrated and likely start dumping things all around the house. So what you want to do is have isolated items, 1 item or 2 possibly that are out. And usually they will figure out something to do, or you can engage them in that way. Quiet area. I do this in schools. We do it here in my home. I do it in the homes that I consult in. You should identify an area in your house that's a hands-off area. It's not a tech area, it's not a TV area, and it's not a cuddle area. Find an area. Usually it works out in the parents' bedroom somewhere, where if you need a break from everyone, everybody in the family knows you can go there and you could decompress for a little while. Maybe it's in the bathtub. Maybe it's somewhere to throw a couple blankets in there, some Anya or some soothing music in the background, and it's an area to go and get away from everyone. Everyone's going to need an area like this. Put it on the schedule for your kids that they can take that area. This is not a time out area at all. It's a place to go and retreat. And I know what you all are thinking, like we all need one of those areas in our lives. Okay, I'm going to skip over a couple because I see that we are
It's okay
slowing down,
to
so
go back to
save
those, Angela. I think it'd be great if you do take a minute for those.
You do? Okay.
I do.
Okay, activity priming. So when something is coming up, I think, and this was from my experiences, is because I hadn't done it. This is one of those learning opportunities that I had. We have ideas in our heads of what we think an activity is going to go like. And sometimes we get so excited about that activity only to have our kids get involved in it, and then we see a tantrum or they start crying and they don't quite have the language to explain to us why that is the case and what it was. So figure out what their expectation might be too. So if you're going to say we're going to go for a walk, if they have the ability to tell you where they want to go, let them. If they have the ability to make choices, let them. But you want to identify what was in their head. What was their idea? When you said go for a walk, and maybe prior to Corona, you were always going to a store, and now you're not going to go to a store. You may have a problem when you get there and they're not at the store, and now they're confused because the expectation in their head was different. So you want to make sure that even though you think that it's clear what's about to happen with this activity, that they are clear as well. Decrease your language, the opposite of what I'm doing in this lecture. We often feel like talking is teaching, and we don't keep quiet enough. This is especially important when you go on those walks. The urge for us to make learning opportunities out of absolutely everything is so crystal clear all the time that you see parents just reaching out, and teachers, look, trees, oh, I see birds, pick up some leaves. Walking, getting fresh air, and getting that activity, all is valid enough. Take that time. Don't talk. Relax. Just go and enjoy the walk. Hold your child's hand, smile at them, go in a different direction, ask them if they want to go in a separate direction or go somewhere new. But it's okay to be quiet. They're not necessarily learning while you're talking constantly anyway. They may have checked out because it's become something that's always happening. When you decrease your language, then when you actually use it, it becomes more valuable. It's kind of like people that drop F-bombs all the time. It's not that big a deal anymore. But if you get someone that you never hear cursing or dropping an F-bomb finally drops one, that has a lot of impact on you. So it's the same with our words, with our kids. Follow their lead too. Now, I don't want to sound like a little bit of a nutty sunrise program person here. However, I was consulting with one child, and this kind of highlighted this point to me very much. I asked the parent, what joy do you get from your child? And this really stumped her a little bit because her focus was so much on enriching the environment and on getting everything going all the time that by the time her daughter was 10 years old, she had never actually thought about that joy. And part of the recommendation was, I want you to sit on the couch with her and cuddle her up while she's playing on her phone and just enjoy that moment. And it doesn't have to be that there's this constant lovely engagement. You can have that. Denise, if you want to stop me at any time and start taking questions, let me know, but I'll just keep going.
Sure. How much more do you have?
It's a lot more. It's going to end up getting cut off. So it's really up to you.
We're not going to cut you off. If you want to go through a few more things, that's completely fine.
Okay. Praise, positive regard, and happy responses. So what the research tells us is that teachers, parents, for every one positive, praiseful statement that we make towards our children, we're giving them 5 corrective ones. Now imagine the dynamic of that ratio of 1 positive statement to 5 negative statements. There is, or negative or corrective. It doesn't have to be negative. It could be constructive feedback, also known as negative statements. So what relationship could be maintained that way? A marriage can't be maintained that way. A friendship can't be maintained that way. That's what our kids are hearing. And those are typically developing kids, not children who get corrected the minute they wake up until the minute they go to bed. So a nice little activity for you to do for yourself one day when that's your one goal is track your statements. How many positive to how many negative? How many praiseful giggles, cuddles, hugs, great job are you giving throughout the day? Now, I didn't want to go crazy into behavior charts and rewards because truthfully, whenever I give recommendations, 90% of my recommendations are about how can we make this environment less toxic for the child and more appropriate. It's not to say that you may not want to rely on something that a child is working towards. So we can make it fun. Some of my favorites are things where you take one of their favorite activities or puzzles, cut it up into pieces, and then they could earn the pieces that go together so that by the time you get all of Elsa over here, all 5 pieces of Elsa, then they can have that break or they can have that special reward. It's fun, it's more exciting, and it doesn't have to be this, sit down, you get tokens for every response that you do. It could be, okay, we got through lunch and nobody cried. Here we go. We've got like 1 that we've earned right here. We want to be realistic and positive. We want to provide opportunities for success. You don't want to set your child up and say, wow, you made it through the entire 13-hour day without getting upset once. Here is your sticker. That's not going to work. You want to make sure that you're setting them up for success. I loved this Lego board reward where each time that there's a mission that's accomplished, the child goes up and sticks a Lego on the board. And when all of the Legos are up, something super exciting happens. I don't know what, You figure out what you think would be the most exciting thing. Maybe it's unfettered, free-range access to iPads. Remember to tell your children what to do. I know this has been said ad nauseum, but you tell them, stop jumping, stop hitting, don't do that. You're not giving them any options about what else they can do. That's when you jump in and don't wait, go over with your options. Here's 3 activity selections. Pick one of these guys. Giving in. Now, you will give in, and that's okay. However, please remember me forever when I tell you, if you're going to give in, like, you know, I don't have it in me to wait out this 20-minute tantrum while this child is waiting for this thing that they cannot possibly have right now. I'm just going to give in. If you're going to give in immediately, because now you're teaching the child to tantrum for 10 seconds. They start screaming or crying because they want something. They don't want to give up their iPad, and you've got 4 other kids who are all starving inside. Give them the iPad. You've taught them to scream and tantrum for 10 seconds. However, if you're going to try to hold your ground and you let that tantrum go for 20 minutes and then you decide you can't take it anymore and you're going to give them the iPad, you've now trained your child to tantrum for 20 minutes. This is where I get the most responses of, I tried ignoring them and it doesn't work. It's because you didn't follow through with not giving it to them. And I also, don't ignore the child. Never ignore the child. Just don't honor their response, their demand, if it's inappropriate or not possible. You can't jump in the lake right now. It's 20 degrees. It's not possible for us to do that. So there will be times when that occurs. However, if you've got a history of that with them, where if they tantrum for 20 minutes, they will have the opportunity to eventually get it. They've learned she's going to break. Eventually she's going to break and I'm going to get what I want. You reward a 10-second tantrum, they might then the next time scream for 10, 15, 20 seconds, but they haven't built up that 20-minute momentum yet. They're going to give up fairly quickly. So don't feel like a complete failure if you give in. You can feel a little bit like a failure if you're giving up to 30 minutes, but if you know you can't do it, just give in right away. Okay. Quickly, I don't want to go too quickly, but I'd actually, Denise, I think this is too much to get into, so I think that we should stop there.
A lot of the parents are hoping that you'll talk about tantrums.
Okay, so I'll keep going then.
We're okay.
I could talk about this for hours, so it's fine. All right, tantrums. Now, everything we've talked about up until now is to hopefully get away from this tantrum. Like, that's what we want to avoid. We want to avoid the tantrum because handling the tantrum is a problem. So I'm going to go toggle between a couple of screens here. So this is from Brenda Smith-Miles, and we're looking at the rage cycle. Now, this rage cycle in kids is just like in ours. So think about yourself when you're in a fury, and then don't expect more of your child than you would expect of yourself. So imagine yourself. Here, over here is where you're rumbling. This is where you've been doing all the laundry, you've been doing all the housework, cleaning, and then someone says, oh, you didn't get to iron my shirts today. That was a total gender bias statement, by the way. You didn't get to iron my shirts. You're rumbling already, and then you fly into this rage. Now, imagine somebody says to you at this point, use your words. Like, what would your response be? I feel like a toaster might go flying across the room if somebody in the middle of my rage told me to use my words. Why? This is not a teachable moment. So when we're looking at the tantrum, they happen. Analyzing and figuring that out is an entirely different talk, talking about functional behavior assessment. And if that is something that everyone's interested in, I could talk about that for 7 hours too. However, right now, in terms of analyzing it, we just want to know how to deal with it. So what you want to identify is, what does your child's curve look like when they're rumbling? You know they're rumbling, something's going on. You want to know, how am I going to behave at the rumbling part? Does that mean I'm going to tell them, hey, let's come into my room and get under the covers and cuddle in bed? Because you're giving them the opportunity to avoid that. Then when they're in that rage, that super duper rage over here, the number one name of the game is safety. You want to keep everyone safe. You want to keep your child safe. You want to keep your own behavior calm. This is much easier said than actually is done. Keeping your own behavior calm while your child is in a rage is difficult, but it's imperative because they're watching you and they're matching you, and you getting just as upset is not going to make the situation better. So here we've got at rumbling. Your goal is redirect and de-escalate. You're not going to increase your language here. You're going to decrease your language. Give a visual aid. See if you can figure out what the problem is and start to redirect, not to clam time, to a calm time. Are they in the rage cycle? Did you miss it? Did you miss that window? So you want to emphasize safety and silence. No confrontation, decrease your talking. This takes effort and practice with all children, with all spouses, with everyone. It takes time. So think about what a smart partner would do when you're in a rage, which is decrease their volume and calm down. And then at recovery, this is when your child is now coming down. A lot of our kids that have more cognitive ability, that I've spoken to with more verbal ability, will actually discuss that they didn't even remember what it looked like in that rage cycle. And if shown videos, they didn't recognize themselves in it. So when your child is recovering from that tantrum, this is not the time to review what caused the tantrum. This is the time to help them and to support them. Tantrums are exhausting. Take a lot of emotional energy out of everybody, and we should be calming. This does not mean if the tantrum was over an iPad that you're going to give them the iPad. You are simply going to help them to calm down and recover. At no point in this rage cycle are you teaching how to use words, a different program, or anything. What you are doing is helping them to either avoid that rage stage or to help them into recovery. Our teachable moments are at other times throughout the day, not during this cycle right here. Time for you. There's online support groups. I don't have a child with autism, but I do have a child with pretty substantial scoliosis, and the online Facebook groups are a big help. I advise getting into a group that has professionals and getting into a group that doesn't, because there's going to be times that you want to complain. You don't want a professional response. You want a parent to support you right back. Let go of your guilt. If there's a break on that schedule, you take your break too. If there's a lot of break, don't worry. You're going to have a lot of engagement as well. And if you set the timer for your child, that timer works for you also. So you have 30 minutes. Don't think about what's going on, as long as everyone's safe. Don't think about it. Just keep going. In terms of, real quick here, language. You want to make sure that you're providing opportunities for distributed practice throughout the day as well. My favorite and easiest language activities to implement is to follow their directions literally. This is so much fun if you really do it, as long as you don't get to the point of utter frustration. If they say, Angela, chicken. So what are you going to do to that? I can bark like a chicken. I know what the child wants. He wants me to cut up his chicken and put it on his plate. But he didn't say that. He's capable, but he didn't. So I'll bark like a chicken. Or I'll say, yep, that's a chicken, and wait until more language comes out. That's a nice little challenge for yourselves to go throughout the day and just kind of say, okay, so where can I embed this, following the rules exactly as to what they say, to see what more language can emerge. If they ask for milk, hand them the carton and see what happens with supervision. If they ask for chicken, hand them the whole chicken and see what happens. Now they're going to ask for a knife or a fork or cut it please. So you can now throughout the day start to embed all of these other language opportunities within appropriate context with natural reinforcement that's coming out of it as well. Closing thoughts. I'm sorry that I didn't get to cover everything with as much detail as I want. I knew better than to put that many slides on, but I did it anyway. Plan your day. Don't skimp on that one. If you're going to skimp on anything, don't skimp on that one. Set your own goals and set a goal a day. So if today you're going to say, today I'm going to make 200 positive statements, and you're going to click them like a bouncer at a bar saying how many that you got through, do that. Just try one thing and see how it goes. Remember that it's going to take the kids time to acclimate to all of these things. If you try a strategy and it doesn't work, please don't send hate emails, this didn't work. It's going to take time to get them done. And don't forget to log your favorite moments. Maybe you have one a day or one a week, but log it. And if you don't have a moment of joy, I would prioritize that as find a way to make a moment of joy actually happen. Good night and good luck. I could talk for quite some time, and hopefully I'll have the opportunity to talk with everyone again and hear any questions that I could maybe globally answer for everyone. If you want to find me, you can find me on Pinterest, and I post visual supports like crazy. And there's also this fantastic Facebook group that one of my colleagues started that you can look up and ask to join, that just provides constant resources during this time of social distancing. So I want to say thank you so much to everyone who attended, and I look forward to hearing what some of the questions are, and I'll do my best to answer what I can, even if it's via email or a posting. So thank you so much.
All right. Well, we've got a lot of questions, as you'd imagine. I mean, some of these are very practical, and I can relate to them because I have a child on the spectrum myself, so I do understand where they're coming from. One of these questions is about, okay, what do you do when the schedule goes sideways and you still want to pull it out of the fire? So the day's been going okay, then everything goes sideways, something unexpected happens, and you want to get everybody back on track. So how do you do that? Do you just point at the board and say, hey, we're just going to go back to this? Do you go reset the schedule, have a little meeting and try to redevelop it? Like, what would you do? Or does it depend on the child? What kind of tips do you have?
I think everything always depends on the kids, but I think that is actually going to happen almost every day. And I think it's actually one of the slides that I bypassed, which is kind of interesting. If something is not going the way that you would like it to go, don't just change it, because now that's going to be very confusing for the child. So what I would do is say, okay, this isn't working, guys, whether you need to regroup your entire family, to do it into groups, or do it one at a time, where you can say, you know what, this is way too much stuff. So let's take some things out, give them a choice and say, if you could pick one thing to take out, what can you take out of the schedule? And you can actually take turns that way. Or what's your favorite thing that you don't want to miss? So I think it's important for our kids to see that we'll make those mistakes too. And I don't want to sound like Mr. Rogers, but it's another teachable moment. You can say, okay, when things don't work out, this is how we're going to modify it. Don't throw it in the garbage, meaning, theoretically throw it in the garbage, because then that's going to set a precedent of, well, if this doesn't work, we just give up on it for the day. So salvage what you can, maybe just lower your expectations a little bit on it.
One parent shared, or it may have been a professional, I'm not sure, about the fact that Boardmaker is free right now. They're allowing parents access. So do you want to talk just really briefly about Boardmaker? Tell people about that.
So Boardmaker is a program that is usually used within the augmented communication devices, where they use the pictures to represent. Now, so for example, there might be a symbol of a stick figure, or now they've added meat to their bodies, going to the bathroom, and it's free, and they're printables. My only concern with it is that if you don't have access to a printer, that might be a little bit more challenging. You can do things online virtually. However, I have found that regardless of the different technologies that are available for schedules and things of that nature, that hands-on schedule is still quite helpful. However, if you have a printer and can print those out, go for it. The picture and what the picture looks like is less important than as long as the kid understands what's going on. So if snack time becomes a symbol of a cup, that's enough. The fact that Boardmaker is free right now, which is normally pretty expensive, get on there quickly and start downloading pictures like crazy if you want. Fortunately, Google Image does a lot too.
Correct. And I know when our son was young, we actually just used the backs of old legal pads and some Velcro. A speech therapist taught us to do that. And we cut pictures out of Googled pictures and used pictures from our family. And that's how we did it for a long time. So there are a lot of ways to deal with that. And then whiteboards, of course, which you talked about a lot.
I love them.
Yeah. The next...
Index cards also. I would use them like crazy for cues, prompts, write them down. Here's the rules. Let's sketch it out. They're very helpful. Low tech is the way to go.
Yeah, yeah, it can be because, right, you can change it pretty quickly. So another question I'm sure you're guessing people are going to ask is about trying to work. So many of us, myself included, are balancing, are trying to entertain our kids and work. You talked a lot about using breaks, which is a fantastic way to do that. Um, for kids who really can't self-manage and for parents who are contending with that, do you have any thoughts or suggestions how they might navigate that?
I think that this is utterly challenging in general for all of us as parents, and I think it's challenging for all parents, whether their children have more significant disabilities or not. So I can't say that I know 100% that I can do it. The only strategy that I could potentially recommend is you need to make a preference assessment of exposing your child to different activities a priority right now, so you can identify what may hold their attention more. And if it is going to be about the movies and the iPads, so you can't get that work done when you can, you're gonna have to let that go a little bit. There's really no other way around it. This is why when the therapists and teachers at school start focusing on leisure skills and activity schedules, I get a lot of resistance sometimes with parents where it's like, well, what about their academics? Their academics. Except really everybody's working for the weekend. The whole point of our life is to enjoy our leisure activities. And this is what we want them for, is so that they can start to self-manage earlier on. I understand that if you've got a 4 or 5-year-old who's just now learning to ask for things, completing an independent puzzle doesn't seem like a priority. But this is where we have to take the time out to do that. So if that's the case, when you're on your schedule and you're not working, then that's the activities that I would prioritize. I would prioritize teaching these play areas. That's the best that I have right now.
So maybe try to talk to your employer about, for the next 4 or 5 days, this is what I need to do so that I can be more productive in days to come.
And break it up. So if you know that your kid can manage 15 minutes or 30 minutes at a time, and you're going to be listening with one ear, cringing when you hear something spilling, or you can hear the self-stimulatory behavior and it's kind of making you a little nuts because you know that they should be more engaged, you have to break it up a little bit more. I don't have a fix for that. I'm sorry.
Okay, so here's a classic problem that a lot of therapists will relate to. So what do you do if you have a child who perseverates on the schedule instead of engaging with the schedule?
Okay, so what I've done in the past, and one of my former colleagues, Amy Salixa, who's not currently living in Oregon, we would actually have Fight Club rules about the schedule. So we would add an additional reinforcement component of a very high priority, loved reinforcer, like Fight Club rules. Like the first rule of Fight Club is you don't talk about Fight Club. So in order to access this high level reinforcer, we don't talk about the schedule. For children that have checking behaviors, like I've had kids that like to check the clock to see what time has passed and are they there, I will usually give them passes to say, okay, here's the schedule, and you get 2 schedule checks per half hour. And that depends on the child. If they're checking it, obsessively checking it constantly, then I might give them, if they're doing it 15 times an hour, I'll give them 10 passes. I want them to be successful. If they check the schedule, we know what's coming up, put the schedule away, do the activity, come back and recheck it. However, I have found that the Fight Club rules apply quite nicely as long as you can find something really exciting. You can even make their responsibility preparing what they can earn is preparing the schedule, cleaning up everybody's schedules at the end of the day, wiping down the dry erase. They could have their chore be schedule duty. So what you want to do is get a competing reward to go with the obsession with the schedules.
Got it. Another question we're getting, and some of this you may want to just redirect to some other webinars we have on our website. People are asking about, my child's engaging in increased self-injury due to this change in schedule, and obviously that has to do with a lot of what you talked about trying to figure out the triggering events and where that may be coming from, and some of this may just be the anxiety linked with this unprecedented situation. So do you have any suggestions for that? Or also, as I said, we have resources on our website where we really talk about that.
Yeah, I think that to be able to speak to that specifically, we really want to look at and do a functional assessment of the child's behavior. However, in addition to additional resources that are available in terms of assessing for what the function is, meaning why is the kid doing it? Are they doing it because they want your attention, because they're frustrated? What you want to make sure that you don't do is overly respond to it. You want to keep your child safe, and you want to prevent them from hurting themselves. It's impossible to watch your child hurting themselves and not intervene. But what you don't want to do is make a show out of it, because then it will start to morph in terms of what they're getting from it. If a kid is hurting themselves, they're frustrated, it's been a go-to in the past, and then in order to calm them down, you start giving them their preferred snacks. Now that's going to start to become their go-to behavior for a lot of things. And we can inadvertently shape that into, now they're doing it when they're hungry, and now they're going to start doing it when they want your attention, or when they want cuddles, or when someone else is getting attention, or somebody else gets a snack. So you want to be very careful in terms of how you respond to that particular behavior. Keep them safe, don't make a big deal, and don't give them things as a distraction. You just want to try to block it to the best of your ability.
Okay, and so Angela, if you could tell me, do you work exclusively with children, or have you also worked with young adults on the spectrum?
The areas that I'm actually much more interested as of recently, the past couple of years, are actually that 12 to 21 age group, that I think that we're, in addition to a lot of unprecedented events that are coming up early, we're going to be looking at 75% of children with autism are going to be over 12 years old in these next coming years. And we're not prepared for how we're going to serve those children. And the professionals that are going into the field do tend to still go towards early childhood and elementary ed. So I think that I tend to now work more with young adults and helping children that now they've got their skills and they are where they are. It's kind of like that saying, do what you can with what you have where you are. When they're 17 years old, you're not going to focus on, okay, let's make sure that we can like touch nose. This is completely inappropriate. We want to make sure that we're looking at leisure. Leisure is my number one area that I'm currently working on, because I think that it's the most important with young adults.
Okay. Well, I think we have time for just a couple more questions. One is a mom this is a teacher who is supporting families remotely, I'm guessing for free during this time. And she said, I'm trying to motivate families to really engage in family time. And it's tricky because of devices and, you know, what you talked about, having a single screen is a victory. So, she's just asking for suggestions about how to really motivate families to lean into this, into trying to play Monopoly, or especially when they have these added challenges. You know, it may be hard enough with a moody teenager who doesn't want to give up their phone, but for our kids and our families, what kind of motivation could she do specifically to target that?
So I think that the first thing I would do is take a look at the family as a whole throughout their day and identify what areas in their day they're coming the closest. Monopoly, I would say, is not exactly the direction I would go with. I've seen perfectly beautifully functioning families fall apart over a game of Monopoly. But I think that picking things that require the least amount of effort on everybody. So this is where physical activities tend to be a little bit easier. So if it's going for a walk, getting outside, building a fort, throwing the kids onto the bed, those types of things where you don't need to practice a lot of skill. It's essentially impossible to do that while being on your phone at the same time. And I would start very small, but you want to pick an area that's going to result in a lot of reinforcement for the family, for the parents specifically, because they're the ones that are guiding it. So building a big fort, building like a parachute in the living room, going for that walk, something that is perceived as not difficult. Trying to get a family that's not used to playing a game to play a complicated game is going to sound like a nightmare. Picking one TV show with a fidget box nearby so we can get away from the tech, but with something else to sit as a family. I used to write entire programs just on how to watch TV because it is a family activity, and frankly, it's a beautiful one for a lot of us to be able to sit and watch an episode of Schitt's Creek together. So it's, I would start with what they're closest to, not pick something that is the, picturesque view of what families do together.
Okay. Well, we are out of time. I think we're going to wrap it up, but I did get a question several times about the free board maker. The person who shared that didn't send the link, but I looked at Board Maker's website. It looks like they're doing free 30-day trials. So if people want to go and look at that, I would imagine you just have to make sure you cancel it before that time. But if you want to Google a free board maker trial, I think that's where you would get access to that. And there may be more information on their site as well. So Angela, thank you. This was great. And I think everybody's going to be hoping you'll come back and do some Q&A, maybe in just a couple weeks. I think a lot of us are going to lean into this and sort of work through it in the weeks to come. So a lot of practical advice today. We really appreciate it.
All right, great. Thank you so much. Bye, everyone.
Yeah, take care, everyone.